Yeah, so my focus is really on strategy around business operations, not so much around the product like R&D, distribution, say production, not that, but more around the business. So strategy in terms of what channel to sell in, like should you sell in food service or retail or as an ingredient to food manufacturers? What kind of budget do you need to be successful in the market? What tactics in marketing and sales should you deploy? All of those kinds of things. The work that I do, I specialize in two kinds of companies. I can work with anybody, but I specialize in two kinds of companies, all within plant-based. One is large food companies that may or may not be plant-based, but they're looking to expand in this space in the US. And so either they're overseas and they want to enter here, or they're a non-plant-based company that wants to launch in plant-based. And I can help them because I know this sector very well, and I can help them understand where the white space opportunities are, what products to develop or launch to be successful, and how to do it in an effective way that allows them to break through the noise and find success. And the second example is startups that are outside of the US and that want to enter the US market. The US is geographically very large, and it's very diverse, and it's extremely expensive to be successful here because you need to be successful with distributors and retailers and food service operators. There's a lot of moving parts. And so my specialty is in helping companies to decide how to enter the US market most effectively, building their strategy, building the budgets and calendars and plans they're going to use to execute, building the team, and understanding the costs and the projected revenues they can expect from that.
Hi, David. Good morning. How are you?
Hello. Very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lovely. So thank you so much for joining in and really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Hi, viewers. Good morning. Welcome to the new episode of Sustainable Future Food Talk. Today, we have with us David Benzaquen from the United States. David is one of the world's leading experts in the plant-based food industry. He invests in and advises alternative protein businesses through his holding company, Mission Plant. He is also the co-founder of consumer insights firm Moonshot Collaborative and an online retail store, plantbelly.com. So great to have you here, David, and taking this conversation. Since you have an extensive experience in the CPG industry in the US as an investor, if you can please suggest a few tips for emerging brands in the plant-based space as to which are those important points that are important from the viewpoint of an investor.
Sure. So obviously everybody knows the plant-based space is growing extremely quickly in the US. And as a result, there are many, many companies that are entering the industry. And so as an investor, I see a lot of pitch decks and I get pitched a lot for investment. And I hear from a lot of amazing companies. I think there are a few things that really stand out to me. One is I see a very frequent mistake, which I'll speak about the mistake and then I'll speak about the solution. So the mistake I see is people will say, oh, I think that the market size for my business is this huge number. And the reason I believe that is because the total, let's say they're making a milk and they say, well, milk is a $10 trillion industry. And so if I just get 1% of the milk industry, I'll be worth blank. And when I hear that, I think, okay, but there is no evidence that you're going to be able to get that 1%. And so when I see top-down financial valuations or projections, I think that's really problematic. And it's not realistic because it doesn't speak about how much competition there is or what it takes to get that kind of percentage of a market. What I'd rather see is a bottoms up projections model where somebody says, we have this many products, we have this many, we are projecting being in this many stores or restaurants. In each one, we anticipate selling this much per week. And so multiply that by our dollars per unit, and we're expecting to do this much in this month, then we'll expand the number of stores to this much. And seeing that kind of bottom up projection model
Sure.
because then I can say, well, why do you think you're going to sell 6 units per week per flavor? Well, the average of that category, we've seen that this company does 10, this one does 4. We think we'll get 6. Okay. And, how confident are you that you'll have that many stores by that date? Well, we have a contract. We're in talks with this. I can properly assess the likelihood that those numbers are real if I understand their bottoms up model. And also, I want to understand that the entrepreneur themselves understands what it takes to be successful and can walk me through their thinking, because that speaks to their knowledge of the space. So that's one big area that I look for in assessing investments.
Interesting. This is such a realistic point, David. I mean, thank you so much for this. I'm sure this will be super useful for the entrepreneurs out there, because this is that point, I mean, which people, of course, pitch it to the investor and look for that fundraise, right? So this is such a realistic point. Thank you so much for this.
Sure.
Lovely. So, of course, you also, I mean, consult a lot of plant-based food organizations. So as a consultant, which are your key core areas that you help plant-based companies with?
Yeah, so my focus is really on strategy around business operations, not so much around the product like R&D, distribution, production, not that, but more around the business. So strategy in terms of what channel to sell in, like should you sell in food service or retail or as an ingredient to food manufacturers? What kind of budget do you need to be successful in the market? What tactics in marketing and sales should you deploy? All of those kinds of things. The work that I do, I specialize in 2 kinds of companies. I can work with anybody, but I specialize in 2 kinds of companies, all within plant-based. One is large food companies that may or may not be plant-based, but they're looking to expand in this space in the US. And so either they're overseas and they want to enter here, or they're a non-plant-based company that wants to launch in plant-based. And I can help them because I know this sector very well, and I can help them understand where the white space opportunities are, what products to develop or launch to be successful, and how to do it in an effective way that allows them to break through the noise and find success. And the second example is startups that are outside of the US and that want to enter the US market. The US is geographically very large, and it's very diverse. And it's extremely expensive to be successful here because you need to be successful with distributors and retailers and food service operators. There's a lot of moving parts. And so my specialty is in helping companies to decide how to enter the US market most effectively, building their strategy, building the budgets and calendars and plans they're going to use to execute, building the team, and understanding the costs and the projected revenues they can expect from that.
Interesting. I'm sure this will be really useful for those organizations who are really want to enter into the US market, and I'm sure they would be connecting with you. So yeah,
I'd love that
for this. Yeah. So David, of course, sustainability is an important element in the coming time, and of course it is growing rapidly. And you at Plant Mission also focus on this a lot, right? So what are those non-negotiables for an emerging CPG brand to consider around sustainability?
It's a great question. So for us at Mission Plant, we are entirely focused on the mission of taking animals out of the supply chain. And so, for us, our non-negotiable is that the product has to be entirely free of animal ingredients. We primarily work with plant-based products. We also do occasionally work with other alternative protein products using fermentation or other technologies that also replace animals. So that's our non-negotiable. And I do feel that that is a great way to help with sustainability because of the improved, because of the lesser water use, land use, and carbon emissions that come from plant-based growth rather than animal-based. But in terms of what sustainability non-negotiables brands should have, I really think that is specific to the brand. And needs to be thought of with each company in mind based on their own values. The reason I say that is that every decision one makes around sustainability or around other ethics is going to limit their options and potentially increase their costs. And there's going to be a trade-off. And so if your product is more expensive, you'll sell less of it.
Yes.
And if you sell less of it and just selling it in place of the product it's replacing is actually reducing the amount of good impact you can have, then it may or may not be worth it. And so let's use an example, right? Let's think about glass, for example. Plastic, people know that plastic is problematic. And when you think about glass, the problem with glass is that it's very expensive, it's very heavy to ship, and it breaks. And so on average in US retail, 20% of glass is charged back to the brand as broken. Not because 1 in 5 jars or bottles breaks, but because out of every 5 boxes, 1 jar or bottle breaks. So if you have a box of 6 or 12 bottles or jars, 1 will break out of every 5 boxes on average. The stores are not going to have their employees dig through those bottles and risk cutting themselves. And so they're going to go back to the manufacturer and say, you have to replace the whole box, which means when you're calculating your manufacturing costs, you have to assume that for every 5 you produce, you have to produce a 6th one that you're never going to make money on. And so you're losing money. Now, there are good arguments to make not to use plastic from an environmental standpoint, but if I'm selling a product that is environmentally going to make a huge impact because it's displacing something that is really problematic, like if I'm selling a plant-based product instead of an animal-based product, or an organic product instead of a non-organic product, and the environmental impact of getting somebody to switch which they eat is more powerful than switching from plastic to glass, then is it worth it, right? It depends. Is using the glass and that additional cost going to make it so expensive that fewer people will make the switch? Then it might not be worth it. So these are very personal decisions that I recommend that each company thinks about. Every non-negotiable they set will have implications for the sales volume of their business. Some of them are so important to them that they should absolutely honor them. And I have no problem with that, but they are tough decisions. And I recommend that you set your non-negotiables up front. You make them as few as possible, but you also insist on the ones that you have, and you never change them, because it's so important that you hold yourself to that standard, and then you deal with the consequences. And if you believe in them, then fantastic. And then you can champion that.
Lovely. This is such a great example. I mean, the interpretation which you have had for a plastic bottle, whether to use that or not against a glass bottle, and this is such a realistic example right from the retail store, right? Because it is very important for a CPG entrepreneur to go in that depth and understand that what is that which is hitting us back, right? So whether to go for it or not is such a tough call. But this is such an important call because it involves a lot of cost. So yeah.
Absolutely. Same with organic, right? I mean, there are some ingredients where the organic version may not be much more expensive to source than the non-organic version. Fantastic. Then it might make sense. But in some ingredients, organic is much more expensive or even impossible to find. And so what impact does that have on your viability? Because if I only work with companies where I believe that their products are a net good for the world. Every time somebody eats theirs instead of the less good version, it saves lives, it helps the environment and everything else. And so if I believe that, then maximizing sales of that product is an extremely important goal for sustainability, for animals, for health. And so where's that trade-off? I have to decide if it's going to make a better or worse impact to sell fewer, but to be organic. Maybe it is. It's about looking at each decision on its merits.
Awesome. Great. Coming down to my next question. So you have had the privilege of working with more than 150 plant-based companies. So based on your experience with these organizations, what were those key challenges that they were facing while building the brand?
Yeah. So one of the areas that I'm not expert in, but I think is a hugely under-recognized challenge is scaling manufacturing. The time it takes to set up a facility or find and work with a contract manufacturer, the changes that one has to make from a recipe that you use at small scale to one at scale on scaled equipment, they're so dramatic. And I think people really underestimate these challenges, and they assume that because you can make something great in your kitchen or in a lab, that it's going to be the same in the factory. It is extremely time-intensive work,
Yes.
and I think that people often underestimate that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say the same thing about fundraising. People very often underestimate the amount of time it will take to fundraise, the amount of effort it will take. And getting no does not mean that you did something wrong. It's just part of the process. You're going to hear a lot more no's before you hear yeses.
Yes.
To put it in perspective, I invest in maybe 5%, if that, of the companies that present investment opportunities to me.
Sure.
And so that's not because I don't like other companies. It's because I have so many opportunities. I have a limited amount of money, and I'm making decisions based on where I feel most passionate, where I feel that I can add the greatest value beyond capital in terms of strategic expertise, all these things. Every fund has those kinds of calculations. And so you're going to hear a lot of no's, and it's going to take a really long time. And so be prepared for very long time needing to be devoted to that. And so when you're planning how much money to raise, always raise more than you need, so that you have enough beyond the time. So if I think that I have enough runway to last me 1 year, don't start fundraising in the 12th month, start fundraising in the 6th month,
right.
And always raise a little bit more. If you really think it'll only last a year, raise 2 months more, right? Always try to have enough. People are thinking about how to prevent dilution by raising too much, and that makes sense. And you can certainly look at ways to raise in pieces so that you're not giving away too much of the company early on, but also be realistic where you're in a much weaker position. If you run out of money and have to go back to ask for more money, then the investors are much less likely to give it, or will really expect much worse terms for you. And so you're better off underestimating your success and overestimating the time it'll take, and being more conservative. And that's a way that then investors are happy that you've used the money more wisely, or that you've lasted longer, or that's gone even further, and they feel like you've achieved more with it. The other consideration in fundraising, if you're worried about wanting to not dilute, but you want to extend your runways, you can raise in tranches. You can say to an investor, please give me, the investor says, okay, I want to give you a valuation of 2 million. You say, well, I want a valuation of 4 million, and you can't agree. Okay. Well, how about you raise part of what you want at a lower valuation, hit some milestones, and then raise the second part at a higher valuation. Right. This way, you're both aligned. You are giving the investor what they want of de-risking the business further and showing that you're more successful. And you are ensuring that you have additional capital available to you when the time is right. And so it'll be less hard to go out and find it.
Absolutely. This is again such a lovely point. I mean, I could very well relate with you with what you are saying, because I mean, like us other CPG entrepreneurs also go through this journey, right? And this is and as you rightly mentioned, that this is a process, right? I mean, you get to hear a lot of no's. That should not make you disbelieve in your brand, but at the same time, you just can consider it as a process and maybe look for more opportunity. So this is a great point. Thank you for this. Lovely.
Sure.
So coming down to my last question for this session, David. So since we are in the first month of 22, so what goals have you set for yourself for this year? Maybe if you can quote one personal and one professional goal.
Personal goal. I am looking to get more physically fit and more active. I'm spending more, even though the official lockdown is over, I'm spending a lot of time at home, and I really want to take care of my holistic well-being. And so I'm taking time every day to exercise. Even if it's too cold outside, I'll do it at home, but just spending, half an hour a day, every day, just doing that raises the mood, makes me feel better, makes me more focused at work because I'm not, too antsy. And so that's my personal goal. And then in terms of professional goal, what I love about my business is that I get to do a lot of different things. So
Right.
I don't know if I have one. I'm excited about every opportunity I take. My professional goal is to continue what I'm doing, to meet great entrepreneurs, to help fantastic products come to market, and to save as many animals as I can.
Lovely, lovely. This is so awesome. Great, and wish you all the best for this. And if you want, we can help you with help you practice yoga also. So that will
Thank you.
keep you fit. I mean, happy to be with you in that journey to achieve your wellness goal or a health goal.
I would love that. Thank you very much.
Lovely. So really appreciate your time, David. The kind of responses which you have given are really realistic, and I'm sure this will be super useful for the entrepreneurs. And I'm sure all those entrepreneurs who are looking to get into plant-based food, or who are already into plant-based food and now wanting to get into the US. So I'm sure you are the right person for them, and happy to connect. So really appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Again, thank you so much.
Sure. And people can find me on LinkedIn or by emailing me at david@missionplant.com.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
You have a great day ahead. Thank you so much once again.
You as well.